She's the CEO everyone respects. Until one woman decides to treat her like she's nobody. What will happen when the truth about who she is finally comes out? Let us know in the comments section below. Natalya Springer didn't have time for second guesses. She stood in front of her bedroom mirror in a crisp slate-hoop pantsuit, her hands steady as she fastened the delicate platinum clasp on her necklace. No hesitation. Not this morning. Her driver was waiting downstairs, the jet was fueled, and Denver wasn't going to wait for her keynote. She had 14 meetings scheduled in the next 36 hours, and if she missed even one, someone would start talking, not about her being late, but about her slipping. And Natalya Springer didn't slip. At 39, Natalia ran NovaJet Systems, the tech backbone of 3 major airlines, and she was also the quiet co-owner of Skybridge Airways, the very airline she was flying today. Most didn't know that. She preferred it that way. Quiet power always spoke louder than loud credentials. She wasn't interested in proving herself anymore. She was interested in watching who treated her like she didn't belong, and how quickly they changed when they realized they were wrong. By 8:20 a.m., she was seated in first class on Flight 716 to Denver, her tablet glowing softly as she scrolled through her morning reports. A man across the aisle gave her a polite nod. A white woman with a scarf tied too tight around her neck clutched her Chanel bag a little closer when Natalia crossed her legs. Natalia noticed both reactions and reacted to neither. Her whole life had been lived in between those two extremes. "Miss Springer, can I get you a beverage before takeoff?" asked the younger of the 2 flight attendants, a brunette with wide eyes and nervous hands. "Yes, chamomile tea if you have it, thank you." The girl smiled and nodded, then disappeared behind the curtain. Natalia caught a glimpse of the second flight attendant near the galley. Tall, blonde, dismissive energy. She hadn't greeted Natalia once. Her name tag read S. Melrose. Natalia didn't need a folder full of complaints to know what kind of woman Susan was. She had known women like her at every phase of her career. Smiles for some, silence for others. Natalia leaned back in her seat, exhaled, and tried to let it go. But Susan Melrose wasn't done making her presence known. 30 minutes later, with the flight steady at cruising altitude, the carts began rolling down the aisle. Susan's voice floated above the low hum of the engines, buttery and oversweet when she spoke to the man in 3A. "Here you go, Mr. Whitaker. Chicken cordon bleu. We hope it's to your liking." Natalia turned her attention toward her own tray. But it wasn't Susan who served her. It was the younger attendant, cheeks flushed. She moved like she was trying to avoid being seen. "Here you go," she said, sliding the meal down quickly. Natalia lifted the foil and paused. The sandwich on her plate was wilted, the bread dented with damp spots. She tilted the edge to see under it. Green mold bloomed along the crust. The turkey inside looked gray. She didn't react outwardly, but her throat burned. Across the aisle, she saw Mr. Whitaker slice into a perfectly arranged chicken breast. A woman behind her commented on how fresh her salad was. Natalia pressed the call button. It wasn't the brunette who answered. It was Susan. "Yes?" Her voice barely masked her annoyance. "This sandwich is spoiled," Natalia said, her voice low but firm. "There's visible mold." Susan leaned down like she hadn't heard correctly. When she did see it, she blinked, just once, but didn't flinch. "Well," she said flatly, "that's the vegetarian option. We're out of the other selections. You didn't specify a preference when you booked." "I wasn't asked." Susan's lips pulled into a tight smile. "Next time I suggest pre-ordering. We're quite full today." Natalia stared at her. "You served everyone else in first class a proper entree." Susan blinked again, slower this time. "I'll see what I can do," she said, and walked off, not even taking the tray. Natalia didn't need to see the full list of meals to know there had been options. She knew Skybridge stocked more than one extra first-class entree on every flight. She had built the system that ensured they did. This wasn't a mistake. It was a message. The tray still sat on her table, untouched, like a slap across the face. Natalia reached down, pulled out her phone, and opened the airline's internal communication app. She didn't draft an email yet. She didn't need to. She just took a photo of the sandwich and saved it. The flight continued, but Natalia didn't eat, and she didn't speak again. Until 20 minutes before landing, when the brunette came back, eyes wide and trembling slightly. "I'm so sorry, Miss Springer," she whispered. "I didn't know. I didn't realize who you were." Natalia looked at her and tilted her head. "Why should that matter?" The girl flushed. It doesn't. I tried to get another plate. Susan said we were out, but I saw one in the galley. I didn't push." Natalia nodded slowly. "What's your name?" "Thank you, Megan. That'll be all." When the plane began to descend, Natalia unbuckled her seatbelt before the captain even finished the announcement. She stood, walked to the front galley, and looked Susan straight in the eye. "You'll want to gather your belongings," Natalia said evenly. Susan frowned. "Excuse me?" "Gather your things. You won't be working the return leg." "I don't understand what you mean." "You will," Natalia said. "In about 20 minutes. Susan's confusion didn't last long. A call was already being routed through Skybridge's Denver ground staff. The name Natalya Springer was blinking on the supervisor's tablet, and everything, every insult, every assumption was about to hit the tarmac. But for now, Natalia returned to her seat. The sky outside the window looked calm, deceiving. The real turbulence hadn't even started. When the plane touched down in Denver, Natalia didn't move. She stayed seated, composed, her tray upright, her tablet still resting on her lap. Around her, first-class passengers began stirring, some gathering their bags, others already calling ride-shares. No one knew what was coming. But Megan, the younger attendant, kept glancing toward her, eyes bouncing between Natalia and the curtain separating them from the galley. Susan hadn't said a word since their brief exchange. The aircraft rolled to a stop at Gate 11B. There was a delay with the door, something about the bridge needing a few more moments to align, a common enough occurrence. But for Susan Melrose, the delay stretched like a countdown. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, chewing lightly on her inner lip. She had served flights for 16 years, navigated turbulent skies, crying infants, drunk executives, and worse. But the stillness of the galley suddenly felt too loud, like silence with sharp edges. Natalia didn't need to lift a hand. Ground control had already been notified by her assistant before the flight even landed. The Denver operations supervisor, Greg Knox, waited just beyond the jet bridge, tablet in hand, a crease in his brow. 2 more staff stood with him. One had a badge, one had a clipboard. Both were uncomfortable. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Natalia stood slowly, retrieving her coat with measured movements. She didn't rush, didn't raise her voice. Didn't even glance at Susan again as she collected her leather tote and turned toward the front. The passengers behind her waited, unknowingly holding their breath, sensing something off but not quite sure what. When Natalia stepped into the narrow exit space, Greg greeted her like a diplomat waiting for royalty. "Springer, welcome to Denver." Natalia nodded. "Greg, we're ready for your report, but there's an additional matter I thought you'd want handled now." "I'm listening." "Mrs. Melrose, would you like us to begin the off-boarding now, or wait until we've documented your formal notes?" "You can start now," she said simply. Behind her, Susan emerged from the galley, confusion blooming into something sharper. She saw the group, saw Greg, saw the unmistakable look of "this is serious" etched into his face. Then she saw the clipboard, the personnel badge. The way Natalia stood. No longer a passenger, but something more. "What is this?" Susan asked. "Why is HR here?" Greg took a step forward. Mrs. Melrose, we need to have a conversation off the aircraft. You're being removed from this flight and will be temporarily relieved from duty pending an internal review. Susan laughed, a short, clipped sound meant to project confidence but lacking any. On whose authority? Mine, Natalia said quietly, stepping aside to make space. Susan blinked, looking from Greg to Natalia and back. You're not even a senior staff member, you're just… The words caught in her throat. Natalia's ID had slipped from her coat pocket when she reached for her phone. It dangled now, clipped just below the lapel, a clean black and white corporate badge with a silver border. CEO, Novajet Systems, Skybridge corporate partner. Susan's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Her spine straightened, her hands dropped. Natalia turned to Greg. Please ensure she is treated professionally and with respect. I don't believe in humiliating people, just holding them accountable. Susan stared like she was watching a building collapse in slow motion. It wasn't just that she'd served moldy food. It was that she had shown her real face to the wrong woman. The right woman. I didn't know, she mumbled. I didn't realize. That's the problem, Natalia said, not unkindly. You didn't care enough to… Megan lingered at the edge of the galley, watching the exchange with wide, unblinking eyes. Natalia caught her glance and nodded once. Then she walked off the plane. In the jet bridge, cameras weren't rolling, but the tension was being recorded in every breath, every sideways glance. Greg fell into step beside her. We'll escalate it through the proper channels. She'll be escorted to a holding room and debriefed. I assume you want to be kept informed? CC my office, Natalia replied. I'll send a formal statement tomorrow. But Greg… He slowed. Yes? He's not the only one, Natalia said, stopping. Check crew assignments. Any previous complaints involving discrimination, passive or overt. I want a full sweep, not a show, a real one. Greg nodded, more serious now. Understood. Outside the terminal, Natalia's black sedan was already waiting, the driver standing curbside, hands folded in front of him. She gave him a polite nod as she climbed into the back seat, removing her coat and settling in as if nothing had happened. Only her fingers trembled. For half a second. Not from fear. Not from regret. From memory. She had sat in too many seats like that, had been looked at like that, had food pushed toward her that was lesser, had been addressed like her presence was an accident. Today's confrontation had been clean, controlled, but beneath that control was a girl who once cried alone in a college lounge, when a professor skipped her during roll call and called on everyone else, who once overheard a recruiter say, "We're looking for someone more pop," who once stood outside a boardroom and listened to a junior VP say, "I didn't expect her to look like that," who once ate her sandwich in silence and threw it away later so no one would know it had mold. But she was not that girl anymore. Her phone buzzed beside her. A message from the Skybridge executive group chat. Noted your incident. We're issuing an internal memo first thing. Let us know if you'd like to speak at the Q3 shareholder meeting. Natalia typed back. Yes, schedule it. She watched the city roll by through tinted windows, glass towers and cranes climbing skyward as if trying to catch the clouds. Denver pulsed with ambition. Natalia smiled faintly. She knew what it was like to build something no one expected to last. Her phone buzzed again, this time a message from her assistant Elena. Megan from your flight emailed. Says she wants to speak to someone about other incidents she's witnessed on board. Says she's scared but ready to talk. Natalia stared at the message for a long time, then replied, "Get her on a call today." Outside, the sun was just starting to climb above the skyline, glinting off glass and stone. Inside the car, it was quiet. Natalia closed her eyes and leaned her head back. She was no longer in the clouds. But the storm? The storm was just beginning. The meeting room at Skybridge's Denver hub was sterile, lined with beige walls and lit by unkind fluorescent lights. It looked like the kind of place where bad news was delivered and pretend apologies were written. Natalia stood near the window, not sitting. Her arms were crossed, but not defensively, more like she was holding something in. Something heavy. On the conference table, a single printed report sat next to her phone, a list of flagged employee incidents from the past 3 years. Susan Melrose's name was not alone. There were 5 other flight attendants whose records showed at least 3 customer complaints each, coded under ambiguous terms like service conflict, communication issue, or passenger misunderstanding. Natalia had underlined them all in red. Elena, her assistant, sat near the door with a laptop open. She was quiet, typing notes as Natalia read aloud from the latest internal message. Skybridge Airways is committed to ensuring equality and dignity for all passengers, regardless of race, gender, or socioeconomic status, Natalia said, her voice flat. I wrote that statement 4 months ago, had it sent out company-wide, and yet, here we are. Greg Knox entered then, slightly out of breath, holding a tablet in one hand and a bottle of water in the other. He gave her a short nod. She's here. Bring her in, Natalia said without turning. Megan stepped through the doorway cautiously, shoulders tight, her uniform slightly rumpled from the morning's regional flight. She wasn't flying again until tomorrow, at Natalia's request. Have a seat, Natalia said, gesturing to the empty chair across the table. Her voice wasn't cold, but it didn't invite small talk either. Megan sat, clutching her hands together in her lap. I'm not going to ask you to relive anything you don't want to, Natalia said gently. But you reached out, so I'm listening. Megan glanced at Elena, then Greg, then back to Natalia. Her voice cracked slightly when she started. I've worked here almost 2 years, she said, and it started pretty early. Little things, at first. Susan would roll her eyes if a black passenger asked for something. She'd swap service duties so she didn't have to interact with certain rows, as she put it. Natalia's jaw clenched, but she stayed silent. She once told me, offhand, that a man in coach was probably trying to scam a free drink because he had a chain around his neck. He wasn't even being difficult, just polite, asked for a ginger ale. Greg shifted uncomfortably. Megan went on. Whenever someone complained about her, she'd brush it off, say they were exaggerating or had a chip on their shoulder. I thought maybe I was imagining it, until I talked to Lila. Lila? Natalia asked. Another junior attendant. She's Latina, said Susan once told her to stop speaking Spanish in the break room because it made her look suspicious. Natalia's nails dug into her forearm. In the sandwich? Megan looked down. I knew there were extra meals. I saw the list before we served. Susan deliberately moved the options around and told me not to fuss over people who think everything's a lawsuit. I didn't argue. I should have, but you were scared, Natalia finished. Megan nodded slowly. Greg took a step forward. We're opening a broader review. This won't land on you, but your statement helps build something real. Megan's eyes watered slightly, but she blinked them back. I want to help, but I need to know I won't lose my job. Natalia leaned forward finally, her hands resting on the table. You won't, she said firmly. You've done the right thing. That matters more than people realize. Megan nodded and stood to leave. Before walking out, she turned back. I'm sorry I didn't do more on the flight. I was scared of her. But after seeing how you stood there, how calm you were, I didn't know someone could do that. Natalia gave a small, tired smile. You'll learn. When the door closed behind her, the room fell into a loaded silence. Who else knew? Natalia asked. Greg exhaled. There were whispers. No one came forward directly, but HR has a backlog of unresolved soft complaints from crew leads. They just weren't escalated. Elena spoke for the first time, because the people filing them didn't look like the ones reading them. Nobody contradicted her. Natalia tapped the table once, then again. "We need cameras on every galley, audio too." Greg hesitated. "Won't the union?" "Let them complain," she said. "I'm not interested in surveillance, I'm interested in accountability." She stood again, walking to the window, watching a plane taxi along the distant runway. There's something about being 35,000 feet in the air that makes people think they're above the rules, that whatever they carry down here, bias, power, entitlement, won't follow them up there. But it does. It always does. Greg lowered his voice. "Are you ready for how this'll look publicly?" Natalia turned. "What do you mean? You're a black CEO firing a white flight attendant after a discrimination claim. You know the headlines. The spin." Natalia raised an eyebrow. "Then let's give them a headline they can't spin." Greg didn't push further. Later that evening, Natalia sat alone in her Denver hotel room, the city lights blurring against the floor-to-ceiling windows. Her laptop glowed in the dim room, open to a draft message she hadn't finished yet. She could still hear Megan's voice, still see the nervous tremble behind her courage. She thought of her own first flight as a businesswoman, sitting in coach with a broken seatbelt and a steward who never once met her eyes. Of the first time she flew first class, and the man next to her assumed she was a flight attendant too. She remembered the weight of being invisible, of having to earn recognition with every breath. That weight never fully left. But today, she shifted it. Her phone buzzed beside her. A message from the Skybridge board chair. "We reviewed your report. If you want to make this a company waste initiative, we'll back it. You want training programs, new review processes, oversight, we'll fund it. Just say the word." Natalia stared at the message, the words ringing louder than her own thoughts. She replied simply, "Yes. Let's change how we fly." She turned off the lamp beside her bed. The room went quiet, save for the low hum of the city outside. Quiet didn't mean safe. But for the first time in a long time, Natalia felt something settle in her chest. Maybe tomorrow, the sky would look different. Natalya Springer walked into the Skybridge headquarters in Atlanta just past 9:00 a.m. on a Wednesday. She could have come in through the side entrance, used the private elevator, avoided the eyes. But not today. Today she walked through the front doors, heels striking marble, head high, her presence loud even in silence. Staff turned as she passed. Some whispered. Some straightened up in their seats. One young man in a Skybridge blazer nodded to her with a kind of quiet awe, like he was watching something rare unfold in real time. Upstairs, the boardroom had already begun filling, a mix of suits and ties, tablets and coffee cups, conversations about projections and metrics. But as soon as Natalia entered, the room recalibrated, conversation halted, eyes shifted. "Good morning," she said simply, placing her tablet on the polished table. The chair of the board, Mr. Samuel Green, rose and gestured toward her seat. No longer a guest seat. The engraved brass plaque had been changed. It now read, "Natalya Springer, Equity Partner, Executive Advisor." She took the seat. "We've received the final findings from your investigation," Samuel said. "The flight crew audit, the bias training rollouts, even the passenger data analysis. It's comprehensive." "I said I wanted to clean the house," Natalia replied. "Not just sweep the floor." Someone chuckled softly, nervously. The room remained quiet otherwise. "We've terminated the contracts of 3 flight crew staff members who repeatedly failed passenger conduct standards," said the COO, "and 2 senior managers who had let reports pile up." "Good," Natalia said. "That's a start." The CTO adjusted his glasses. "The feedback loop from passengers is already improving. We've had several emails thanking us for what they're calling the Springer standard." Natalia blinked. "The what?" Samuel smiled slightly. "Seems the story of your flight went viral. Not from you. Someone in first class posted a thread on social media praising how you handled the situation. Said it was the first time they'd ever seen a person of power confront racism in real time without theatrics." Natalia fought back a smile. "Wasn't looking to go viral. That's why it worked." The meeting moved forward. Budgets were reviewed. Next quarter planning began. But as Natalia sat among them, something shifted. Not just in the room, in herself. This time, she didn't feel like the outlier. She felt like the builder, like the blueprint. After the meeting, she stayed behind to review final documents with Elena. The assistant had grown bolder in the weeks since the incident, speaking up more, trusting her instincts, asking sharper questions. "You have the interview with CNN tomorrow," Elena said. "And then the new training pilot kicks off in Dallas next week. Do you want me to confirm your presence?" "Yes," Natalia said. "I'll be there." Eleanor paused. "Also," Megan emailed again. Natalia looked up. "She's enrolling in a leadership program," Elena said. "Says your support gave her the courage." She attached her personal statement. "It's really good." Natalia took the tablet and read. The words were simple, but strong. Megan had written about the fear of speaking up, the moment she decided to do it anyway, and how seeing someone who looked like her in power changed how she saw herself. Natalia read it twice. "Tell her I'll write her a recommendation." "You already did." Natalia smiled. That night, she flew commercial, by choice. She boarded a flight to Chicago, row 2A, and declined the pre-boarding offer. She let the elderly man beside her settle in first, helped him lift his briefcase, and then buckled her belt with a quiet ease. The flight attendant came by a few minutes later. Young, new. "Welcome aboard, Miss Springer," he said. "We're honored to have you." She didn't flinch. "Thank you, but you can just call me Natalia." He nodded, a little embarrassed. "Of course." As the plane took off, she looked out the window. The lights below blurred into patterns. The runway vanished. Mid-air, the captain's voice broke the silence. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Flight 222 with non-stop service to Chicago. We want to take a moment to recognize a passenger in our cabin, Miss Natalya Springer, for her work helping us build a better Skybridge. Her leadership has reminded us that dignity should fly with us always." There was a light round of applause. Natalia didn't wave, didn't stand, just sat back, the corners of her mouth turned upward. It wasn't about recognition, it was about resetting the altitude. The rest of the flight passed quietly, but something had changed in the air. When the plane landed, a flight crew member approached. Natalia gathered her things. "Mrs. Springer, just wanted to say, my mom was a flight attendant. She used to tell me how she wished someone at the top cared more. I think she'd be proud of what you're doing." Natalia touched his shoulder, gently. "Tell her it's never too late to change how we fly." As she walked off the plane, the terminal bustled with the usual movement, people rushing, children laughing, announcements echoing. The world continued, but she moved through it differently now. Back straight, purpose clear. Not just flying, leading. And for once, the seat she occupied wasn't something she had to fight for. It was the one she'd built,